Welcome back to the ICT sponsored 6-day STTP on blockchain applications. I hope you all had a sumptuous meal. As I've already mentioned, we are having two exciting sessions coming up this afternoon. Yes, here we go. From the bottom 1% to the top 1% for the whole 100%. Feels quite like a fairy tale story, right? Yes, it is. That's how Ms. Dashida herself has elaborated on her remarkable journey. We have with us Ms. Dashida Gillis, CEO of MANCH, which is a leading sustainability-linked, value-driven, technology-enabled impact platform, accelerating achievement of the United Nations, SDGs, and building trust and transparency, starting with a multi-billion-dollar philanthropy and impact investing sector. MANCH has also won the Best Startup Award of the year 2019 from Infosys Limited. She also worked in the Standard Chartered Bank operational risk sector. And she's also one among the 100 most influential in UK-India relations for her exceptional performance. And with great pleasure, I invite Ms. Dashida Gillis to deliver the session. Dashida, the screen is all yours and we are all yours.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone for joining. If you can, Jacob, thank you for the introduction. If you can please indicate with your thumbs up, you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. Perfect, we can hear you.
It's so interesting and exciting to see over 100 participants joining and interested in this topic. And as a fellow Indian, I also think that, when I was born and brought up in India, in a very humble home, and there was inequality. There was times when I questioned, why is it that my friend can go for a holiday to Goa, and as a family we can't even go to the beach because we don't have money? And it was fine at the time because I was born in the context. Now when I am sitting so far away in London and looking back at the time, and I think that the world has grown so small because of the interconnectedness we share. But at the same time, our economies have grown over 100 times. But still, in places like India or in Africa, most of the Latin countries in South America, people still have the same problem. The challenges have not solved. There is still same inequalities. There is still indifference in or challenges remain in the space of how we distribute capital. And I personally believe that blockchain as a technology of course, it has many applications, but when applied in the financial services sector, can really enable redistribution of capital or reallocation of capital in a way that we create economies that are more inclusive and work for all. So just with that sort of big picture, but also very personal example, I want to go into sharing with you all um, what I've done so far, what I have learned when it came to blockchain, and where we had hiccups and challenges, so that you don't have to have the same challenges again, and your journey in whatever blockchain application you're thinking of can be smoother, faster, and can achieve success increasingly. So let me start with um, maybe first let's start with just giving you a sense of the philanthropy sector. And what I mean by philanthropy is, if we think of money, there are really three ways in which we use money. Money that we give, which is for charities or non-profits, or when we see a poor person on the street, we give them money, we are not expecting the money back. Then we have money that we invest. So these are commercial investments we make with a view to earning more than the money we put in back. And then the third is money that we spend. So this is money where we exchange in return for goods and services. And right now I'm going to focus just on the money that we give, and just to share with you how the world of that money that is being given away works. So when I started my blockchain application, the first thing is you have to understand the sector in which you're going to apply the technology. So in the in the philanthropy sector, we have in the UK over 168,000 registered charities. In India, I imagine there is over 1 million trusts and charities, etc., registered across all across all states. The same globally. In the UK, in particular, because I was applying this particular blockchain instance for the UK market, I'm going to share my example from the UK market. But for you, no matter where you are and where you want to apply the blockchain technology, the idea is that you look at the country and sort of you dive deeper into the sector in which you want to apply the technology. So in the UK, there are 168,000 registered charities. Last year, or over 168,000 charities. And last year, so this is year ending 2019, reported by the Charity Commission, which is the regulatory body where you register as an organization, shared the data that these 168,000 charities received 77 billion UK pounds in income. And so this shows you that there is enough money that is waiting to be given away, or is being given away. And what remains a challenge is a lack of transparency on how this money is actually being spent, what impact it is delivering. And my personal challenge and also my planetary challenge for myself was, can we apply a technology like blockchain to bring transparency, to enable clarity, and then therefore we're using data analytics and the power of the tech that we already have access to, can we channel these funds better? Can we deploy these funds in areas where the need is the highest? And because there is no clear data, money is not being applied. So how can we create incentives for people and organizations who hold capital to make better decisions about giving? So that was my first sort of big market sizing. Then as a business, as you develop the case for blockchain application, there are 6 things you need to consider. I don't know if any of you are taking notes, but I'm happy to speak slowly so that you can record some of these notes as well. But if any of you at any point in time need a clarification, you can reach out to me. So when you're starting with let me start again. So I'm going to talk about 6 key criteria that you as a person who's assessing whether blockchain is applicable in this instance should ask yourself before thinking that blockchain is the best solution. So the first one is there a predictable, is there a repeat process that can be automated? So for example, in the charity case in the UK, yes, 100% the case. Charities register, that's a repeatable process, it's a predictable process. Trustees who are part of the charities get verified, again, repeat process. There's generally every charity is fundraising and they are dispersing funds towards projects. These are again repeat processes. Charities also compile their accounts. They get them, some of them get them audited. They file returns. They share reports with their stakeholders on impact and how their money is spent. So this is just giving you an example. Okay, there are a whole lot of processes which are repeat processes. Second, is there an ongoing or a long running transaction rather than just a one-off? Because it is no point in building a very technically heavy, sophisticated blockchain solution if if it's only a one-off transaction. or it's very rare transaction. So in the case of charities, obviously they're raising funds and they're delivering solutions over a long period of time. And the blockchain smart contracts can really be used here to hit milestones, and money can be released the moment these milestones are being achieved. So there is some process here where technology can really help the sector. Third criteria is, are there multiple stakeholders in this process or in this value chain? If it's just me giving money to you and you reporting back to me, it's not a problem. We don't need blockchain between you and me. But if there are many stakeholders, like the regulator, the charity itself, the people who give money to the charity, sometimes there are third parties in between who enable people to give to the charities. And there are also lawyers, accountants, tax authorities who are involved. So there are multiple people who are part of a philanthropy process. And generally, in a case in developing countries, there are also the beneficiaries, the people who actually receive the value from the charities. As a donor, I would love if I didn't get a report from the charity, but I actually got a report from the person who benefited from my donation to say, hey, thank you. Because of your help, I am able to study, or my family has a better home, etc. So blockchain can also enable, if there are multiple stakeholders, to build trust and transparency in ensuring that all parties have access to the same data sets. Then the fourth criteria is there a need for reconciling disparate data sets? And generally, this role is played by a few parties or just one or two parties. So, what I mean by that is, for example, in a charity or in a nonprofit, um, the data is generally reconciled by the charity itself. And then the charity submits to the charity commission. And this information that they submit, it generally lacks depth. It does not have a lot of inputs, because a lot of these structures that were created before um, don't necessarily ask for impact. The role of the regulator is tell me how much you received and tell me how much you spent. I don't want to know what you actually did with it or what impact you had. So there is data that the charity is creating, which is, hey, I'm having this impact. And there is no one really collecting that in an aggregated way. Now, here, if I just step out a little bit and I say, I go back to where I started. At the moment, there are so many organizations doing such amazing work, and at the same time, there are organizations who are not really doing the work, but because they're big, famous, or they know someone, they have access to money, but they're not really delivering the value. When we put a technology like blockchain in that space, what happens and what can potentially happen is that there is visibility of what's really happening, and there is visibility of what's not working, and there is visibility of where are still the gaps. And at the moment, still no one actually is aggregating impact data at the scale of the whole. Our governments are tracking data, but they're not tracking it with a view to impact. They're tracking it with a view to just reporting back in terms of the general demographics. Um, they are not tracking in the sense of this organization helped educate 100 people in this village in India. They're just tracking, okay, in Kerala, the population is, let's say, 30 million and everyone is educated. But they're not tracking, okay, who helped educate all these people. And so there is a need for reconciling that data that is missing at the moment. The fifth criteria is there an element of value transfer? And value here is not always just money, but is there something that's valuable in recording this data? Because if the data itself is of no value, then it will be very hard to convince people to use the blockchain application that you make. So it's very important to, before you even set out on a blockchain journey, to assess whether there is value that is being transferred. Um, and it can be in many forms. So obviously in the charity instance, in the philanthropy sector, there is transfer of money, there is transfer of goods, there is transfer of services to charities. Charities then transfer these monies and goods and services to the deserving people in different countries, or they plant trees, or they enable policy changes. They enable better living conditions. They maybe make better opportunities. So there is a value that is being created, which makes it a key criteria as to why and whether there should be blockchain. And then last but not the least, but this is one of the important questions, which, if it is not satisfied, you could have all the 5 yeses. But if you don't have this one as a yes, it still is not the best case to apply a blockchain solution. So the sixth criteria is there value in an immutable record? Is there value in having something that cannot be changed? Is there value in having something that cannot be fungible? And the answer here, especially in the philanthropy sector, yes, absolutely yes. And we know that money is fungible. I can say I received this money and I can show I did that. But did I really do that? I don't know. Um, and so blockchain can again be a fantastic tool to enable transparency, to enable accountability, and to really build trust in a sector that is really losing trust. And and especially we know from the global data that we know on development, it's really the developing countries that need access to the philanthropic money so they can invest in certain infrastructure that are not being necessarily invested by governments. Corporates will never invest in that just because there is no profit motive. So it is important that we channel this precious philanthropic capital towards these initiatives that actually build societies. And if these societies can demonstrate that I can receive capital in a way that I can show you back with openness and transparency what I've done with the money and how it has built our society, it will become a magnet in attracting more and more capital. And for that reason, I would say, so these 6 criteria really then enable you to assess whether a particular case, business case, or an application case is suitable for introducing a technology like blockchain. Thank you. I have many more things to add, but maybe let me pause here. If it is clear, if anyone has questions just on this part, and then I can move on.
Participants can unmute yourself and ask your queries.
Good. Either everyone is sleeping and not interested, or I have explained so clearly that there are no questions. I will assume it is the second, and I will move on. So firstly, like I said, before assessing whether blockchain is a good fit, it is important to ask these 6 criteria. And that gives you an insight on whether a particular situation is applicable for blockchain. Then there are obviously the technical layers of the blockchain application itself. The you need to start assessing, okay, what are the protocol layers? Is this going to be a public blockchain, or is it going to be a private blockchain? Is the data sensitive? Is the data publicly available and might be useful to be to have it as an open blockchain? Which also, again, you have to assess the pros and cons of both options. The other consideration in the protocol layer is what are the design expectations regarding the speed, the programmability, and the functionality of the system itself. So speed and low cost transfer are obviously in a philanthropy situation can be fantastic because it can enable mass movement of funds. Right now, charities in India, let's say, have to wait an average 2-3 weeks to go through the due diligence process, another 1 week to receive money. But with blockchain, for example, you can literally, as soon, because your due diligence is always available um, in a public record on time, there's virtually zero time. There's just an instant download of documents or instant download of the verified data. And the transfer of funds, if it is used by tokens or enabled by other widely used token, that then the funds transfer can be within 15 seconds. So the speed at which funds can move from one place to another can massively increase speed at which we develop as countries, but also can need to be a part of the consideration of the design of the blockchain application, and especially the protocol layer. If there is a need for a lot of testing and a lot of verification, and all of this needs to be sort of incentivized to be validated frequently, sometimes the system can actually take longer. So these are like things to consider, like how fast can we do it, how slow does it need to be, how many minimum or maximum parties need to be involved, and all of these design considerations need to be had very early on before you actually start building the tech itself. And then the next is, are there developer resources available? Is the protocol that we are using for the blockchain robust, and is it sustainable as well in the long term, so that it's not so specific and made bespoke to your application that, you know, if the developer resource is gone, that, you know, someone can't understand what's been written there. So there needs to be a large enough community that can write protocols in a standard kind of way, that can be, you know, sort of updated and built on as you learn in the market what's working and what's not working. So these are like some protocol layer considerations that you need to have in place. Next consideration you need to have is the networking layer. So this is now really going into the users who are really going to run the nodes, who's going to actually write and or upload, who's going to read only, who has authority to access, who does not have authority to access. So these kind of user related stakeholder related questions need to be thought of. Then in the networking layer, another very important thought to have is what other technology integrations need to be considered. If there are payment portals that the system would engage with, or if the government has a specific system, how will this system speak with the government system, etc. So all of these technology requirements, integration requirements need to be thought through. Another consideration in the network layer is how significant are the resource requirements of the given node. And you need to almost like estimate, you can't know everything up front, but you need to have like a little gauge of, you know, what are you going to need, how many people are you going to need, you know, how much investment is going to be involved in developing this network layer. And then finally, what you need to consider in the network layer is what are the data storage requirements. And this is very important because a lot of the time we think, oh, it's amazing. But as the data goes on accumulating, the question of storage becomes very relevant. And the questions around for how long you need to archive this data, what are the regulations regarding the proper use and storage of this data. So all of these kind of questions need to be considered at the networking layer. And then finally, it's the application layer. So this is how the user will actually interact with the blockchain technology. So for this, it's very important that you are considering because this is behavior change. So you have to consider, how is the current user already using or will use this application? And therefore, what is the UX, UI, and the experience considerations you need to have as you build this application layer. Also, you probably is a good idea to assess if there are behavioral patterns or other ways, or the organizational structure that is going to engage with this technology. Because if this product does not fit in their workflow, you'll have built something amazing, which is very valuable, but no one is going to use it. So this is again a very practical consideration to have in your design thinking process of any blockchain application. And then finally, are there any behavioral changes that will be necessary to use this blockchain application? And then you can have teams that can start thinking, okay, so someone will need to do this extra, or actually, because they have this technology, they don't need to do that. So you have to find a way in which how you're going to make this technology fit in someone's lives so that they will actually use the technology. So that's again a short summary. I'm sorry, because obviously we have short time. I'm not going into too much detail, and I'm keeping it at the level where it can be widely used, and this information can be accessible to most of you. But I'm happy to answer any sort of more in-depth questions as well. Um, I have another half an hour with you all, and I want to share a very small sort of summary of all of this. Yes, 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 and where are we, and what are the challenges? So some of the practical things that can really help you in whatever application you're working on. But before I go that, any other questions, any other thoughts? Anyone wants to share anything that comes up for you?
Deshita, one participant would like to know your remarkable journey into the field of blockchain technology, if you could please.
Yeah, sure. I started. I started in Mumbai. I'm from Bombay, Bombay girl, and I studied in as a chartered accountant. Although I always had a love for sciences, um, for very personal reasons, I just decided I wanted to do commerce, and I joined Narsi Monji College, which is the best for commerce in India. And um, uh, and then my friend said, oh, we are all going to be chartered accountants, we're going to go and write the CA exam. So I said, okay, well, I will join you all, but I didn't want to become an accountant. I just wanted to hang out with my friends. um, at that age, that's what's important. And it turns out that for the first exam, none of my friends passed, only I passed the exam. And I studied so hard because I thought they're all going to pass, I'm going to fail, and I'm going to get stuck behind. um, but the journey was actually quite different. And as you know, just like engineering, chartered accountancy is a very competitive exam in India. Every year there are two exams, and only 100,000 like students appear. And then of the 100,000 students that appear, 1,000 pass, and then the top 50 get national merit. So I was fortunate in the finals that by the time I finished my chartered accountancy, I was amongst the top 47th in the country. Um, and what was interesting during this time was, I come from a very humble home. We didn't have a lot when I was growing up. And on the day of my chartered accountancy exam, the electricity fellow came home in the evening, and he said, your father has not paid the bill for 3 months. We're going to cut off the electricity. and I was so um, uh, like concentrated and focused on my exam, I didn't really listen to what he said, and he just cut off the electricity. It was only later at night when it became dark that I realized, oh, I should have just given him $100 and said to him, come after 1 week, and at least I would have had light for my exam. But that night I just said, I'm not going to cry tonight, because if I cry, I will fail. But if I put a candle and I study, I will pass at least. And it's not the most fair thing, because everyone has electricity when they're studying, and they don't have the stress of not having money, etc. And I have all the stress. I don't have electricity, and I still have, like, God, like, really, do you need to test me on this day? And the one thing I've learned from my life from then on is challenges are not there to break you. They are there to show you how strong you are. And I'm so glad that I put my focus where I needed to that night. I studied, and as I said, I got 47th across all of India. And what that meant was that opened up um, corridors for me to work in very some amazing international companies. I started my first job at Standard Chartered Bank in India, in Bombay. And I was working with the board directors there. And what was really interesting about the role is very quickly I saw how decisions are made by very senior people. And I became very curious, if these people had the power to make different decisions, what would they need so that they would make different decisions? And and so after my career in banking, I thought, okay, I need to do some work in leadership development, and sort of train them to think more inclusively and think more broadly, and not just think in terms of profit and risk and return, and sort of, where's the money, and I will just do what earns me money. It doesn't matter if I end up sort of killing a whole lot of animals or trees in the process. um, and so I did a whole lot of leadership development work. um, um, and I traveled. Then I was married as well. That's another story. I lived in Jakarta in Indonesia for 2 years. um, and I left banking when I was pregnant. I have a daughter now, she's 11 years old. And I moved into leadership development. And as I was working in leadership development, I also saw that amazing leaders, when you talk to them personally, they are real human beings. Every one of them, I would say, has this one common thread. We all want to make a difference. And yet when we go back to our desk and sort of do our corporate job, we still end up doing what the job is required to do. Because if we don't do it, we'll be out, someone else will come in and they'll do it. um, and so I became interested in systems change, and I felt, okay, I need to push myself a little bit more and look at, so how can we change the system itself? And then, long story swift, um, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals came about, and I was writing and speaking a lot on sustainability at the time. Pope Francis set up a small group to look at the Laudato Si and to look at how we could bring this into the corporate world, the core message. And I was part of that group. Um, and then there was also uh, an increasing uptake in technology, and that really was for me like the point where I said, okay, I know how the financial world works. I know how leaders make decisions. I know what we need to do as a planet. I don't know anything about tech other than that I love using tech. I don't know anything else. So I decided to just read a lot and go for any and every course that was available online to learn. And then I started applying what I was learning to a very practical business idea. And I started Munch, the company I run now, um, in 2018. But the seed of it was sown many, many years ago. And I started thinking of, okay, how do I apply this technology and all this learning I have into something that's very practical, that can enable decision makers to have the information they need on their fingertips, so that they cannot say, if I knew, I would have made a different choice. And that's what I'm focused on. It's a long answer. Any other question or comments or thoughts?
Good afternoon, madam. Yeah, one question I had was like, what is the biggest challenge while applying blockchain in philanthropy, especially like when you deal
Can I
with
be a bit more
fundraising events
audible,
and all?
bit more louder, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just curious about the biggest challenge that you will be facing while applying blockchain in philanthropy scenario, like especially in fundraising events and all this stuff. Can you please
Yes.
elaborate?
Thank you. I got your question. Appreciate it. So speaking of challenges, so like I said, you have the criteria that lends itself to philanthropy, all the 6 criteria. Yes, yes, yes. A thorough consideration of all the layers. Yes, yes, yes. A very good plan of action, and we are ready. But as they say, a plan never meets reality as is. You have to change one thing or the other. And the reality with the philanthropy sector is that it's a lot more challenging when it comes to behavior change than I had expected it would be. So it makes a fantastic story, right? If I am more transparent and I share with you transparently, I will be attractive to attract more capital. Now, there are many challenges in that statement, or many assumptions in that statement that people actually want to share. um, Second, I think also there is a lot of vested interest in keeping the current system going as it is. Um, the third challenge is regulatory borders. So, blockchain is a universal technology, it does not recognize country borders. And yet, as a world, our governance is very much country driven. Um, so while I can create a system where money can flow in 15 seconds from one person's wallet to another person's wallet, um, but the regulations between our countries can get in the way, and sort of break everything that we have built, that is super amazing and convenient and needed and all of that. um, so these were like some of the early challenges we had. The second is because the technology is still so nascent, i.e., there are still challenges about the governance itself on a blockchain. How is the data validated? Who has the authority to change data on any node? And really, the developer who writes the code has a massive power, and therefore, in the end, the key question is, can we trust ourselves? um, because and the answer is universally, if I have to ask, I can answer for myself, yes, I trust myself. I can answer for my family, yes, I trust my family. uh, but we have not yet reached at a global consciousness level where we can say the whole world is my family and I trust everyone in my family, because we have so many challenges, and news definitely don't help. um, so I would say that there are many practical challenges when it comes to implementation of the uh, blockchain technology itself, and a lot of it has to do with um, one, people not wanting to change, if especially if things are working well for them, they don't want to change and or adopt anything new. And those who want anything new don't really have the power or the resource to apply it to what's needed. So yeah. Any other?
Dashida, can we have one more question? Yeah.
Yes, of course.
How Manch kind of joined the dots to achieve the sustainable development goals of the UN?
Yes. So when I started Munch, like I said, my first preference was to put it on a blockchain. And as I started going through the actuality of what that entails, I realized that, firstly, while it meets all the requirements, I don't have the base network to make it work, and the buy-in from the base network to make it work, to say, okay, now let's scale this. So the first thing you have to do in the application is build the network itself. And as you know, as it was mentioned in the earlier introduction, is for me, Munch is Munch in Hindi means platform. Munch is a way for me to really bring all the data sets about development that are being submitted by countries to the United Nations in a way that enables us to have a look at what's being done towards development, where are still the gaps, and therefore how do we mobilize money towards filling up the gaps. And what we have been successful at so far is, firstly, we built the whole system so that it can be decentralized as soon as we have the core network ready to adopt transparency. At the moment, all the data sits on a central server / a Munch server. But the one thing we have done in our contracts is that we have agreed all the data is owned by the organizations that put the data on. So it's not, we are not a company selling data as for marketing. And then what we have also done is we have started to, sort of build the whole process of how money will flow in terms of how a charity gets registered automatically from the Charity Commission, can upload their data on the Munch side. Their data already is uploaded, and then they can create projects and they get funded. If the projects are already funded, they can start verifying the data points as to how they're actually fulfilling on these projects. And once they validate these data points, we can say very precisely that you have achieved sustainable development goal X, Y, and Z. And that means we are able to join up, not just for one charity or 10 charities, any and every charity anywhere in the world. They can go on the Munch platform. They can get themselves registered on the platform. They can write about the projects they are working on. And as these projects come together, we can start to pull more and more data together to actually see who is doing what and where are still the gaps. We are still, I would say, at barely scratching the surface. We only released our first version of the platform earlier this year. We have now 700 charities that are onboarded, and we are opening up the platform across all geographies in the coming months. So anywhere, any organization in India or in Pakistan or in Uganda or Tanzania or anywhere in Chile can actually put their work online, so we can see what's happening, and then we can share it back to the world that this is where we are still not putting enough capital, and we'll start doing that as soon as we have a large enough data set. Finally, what we are also doing from this year, as you know, the coronavirus has changed our lives, and the future will never be what the past looked like. And we have already started building technology for large funds that are investing in companies. So again, we are building mirror dashboards, how the investment money we invest, how is that having an impact? And then Munch will be able to join up. This is the money that we give and the impact we have. This is the money we invest and the impact we have. And we'll be able to have, hopefully in many years, also the money that we spend, and this is the impact we have. And then we can truly embed impact in our decision making when it comes to using our money.
Thank you, Darshita. I think you can move ahead with the session.
Brilliant, thank you. I don't have anything more to add, so I'm happy to take a couple more questions.
Okay, we've got another question. Why Manch has not yet adopted blockchain? Or can you elaborate on the challenges on adoption of blockchain in philanthropy where stakeholders refuse to reveal?
Yes. So firstly, why not blockchain? One, it is an expensive technology to invest in. Two, like I said, there are enough players, but there isn't enough coordination and collaboration. It's still a messy sector. And finally, we have not found a business model that makes the application of blockchain financially viable for us as a business to deploy it for the use that we have. So what we are waiting for is actually develop the business and the business case that lends itself valuable and also investable for a blockchain solution. The typical challenges around not lack of adoption are because it's philanthropy. They think, oh no, we don't need this. Everything is working well. We can use Google spreadsheets. Um, and they, and even if I have to say, okay, we'll make it really cheap and easy, you just have to pay, 100 rupees. I don't think organizations are really interested in investing in even a small amount as that. So and or we need to find sufficient number of organizations, even if it's a few, who will say, actually we are prepared to pay, 100,000, and we'll bring our full network under the blockchain principle. Then it works. But at the moment, yeah, our biggest challenge with the philanthropy sector has been around lack of uh, interest from the people who actually sign the checks in these institutions.
Thank you, Darshada. Participants, you can unmute yourself and ask your queries, or you can type in the chat box. Yeah, we've got another question. Is Manch providing internship opportunities for students from India?
Yes. Yes, our technology company is based in Bombay. It's Agaetis Technologies, AGAETIS.tech. And the Munch company in India, we are looking for product managers. We're looking for people who can just informally help us in onboarding charities. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. If there is anyone who's interested in helping us sort of build this a little bit more forward, we definitely seek your support.
Thank you, Darshada. Yeah, we got another interesting question. What is the message as an Indian you have to give to aspiring entrepreneurs?
Thank you. I would say being Indian is something very unique that I find. It opens up many opportunities for me. And what I also know from my experience as an Indian is, at least the age and the time where I grew up, is I had a very strong inferiority complex. I felt that everyone is better than me. And I felt I had amazing ideas in my head, but I did not have um, the skill of communicating my thoughts in a way that actually made things happen. So I would encourage every one of you who wants to be an entrepreneur is firstly invest in your self development. It is incredibly important. And as you know, even as a woman, I grew up very shy. I grew up in my mind thinking my parents will choose my husband and I will marry whoever they say and I will be a housewife. So I had to go through a lot of like taking away all these social conditioning layers, and go into immersive like coaching environments where I had many tears and crying for I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do that. And the moment we recognize that, you know, our parents and our culture is there to help us, not to hinder us and not hinder our progress, then the culture becomes our strength, not our limitation. So and for me it's also, you know, I'm still Indian even though I live here in London. My family, their favorite dish, everyone at home, is dal and rice. They don't want anything else. They're happy with dal and rice every day. um, so I would say culture is important. It's not something that we toss away because we are entrepreneurs. And at the same time, there is a lot in our culture and the way that it has been given to us that can sometimes be limiting. So it's important to go on an awareness journey, and make yourself stronger as you want to build your organization stronger. The next thing I would say, especially for aspiring entrepreneurs, is there are two things you need to bear in mind as you start the journey. One is you have to assess your personal degree of comfort with uncertainty, because the business landscape is always uncertain. If you as a person are uncomfortable with uncertainty, then it becomes very challenging to grow an organization. So first thing you have to make sure is you have to build your internal capacity to be a decision maker when things are uncertain and keep moving and pushing the needle forward. And then the other consideration is your personal relationship with fear. Um, because if you know, everyone experiences fear. I experience fear as well. And we all have very typical fear responses. You know, either we freeze, we don't do anything about it, or we fight, we get angry, or we push back and we move through. Um, or we flight, we run away from it, we go, this is not for me, I'll do something else. So you have to understand as a person, you know, what is your um, uh, sort of uh, hardwired way of operating when it comes to being with fear. And if your relationship with fear is I should not have fear, then it's going to be very challenging running a business, because there are many instances where the uncertainty will literally fire up fear across your system. And so I would say, yeah, if you can develop a good, courageous, creative relationship with uncertainty and fear, you are really ready to rock on any business that you touch. And then obviously there are very practical things about business, which you can study in any MBA class or online resource around, you know, business plan and this and that and everything else. But I would say internally, these are like few things that, irrespective of any business, that apply to you as a human.
Thank you, Darshita. I think there are no more questions from the participants. So shall we wind up the session?
Yes, thank you.
So thank you, Darshita, for that wonderfully poised and scintillating session. The criteria for assessing whether blockchain is suitable for your application was indeed remarkable. Wishing you all the best on your way forward with Manch. Looking forward to connecting with you in future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and all the very best.